Today's Future Forward Analyst session, our guest is Nadia. And we're going to be talking about the role of the business analyst in software development project or within the team. It's very common to hear that there's a high rate of software project failure, and this can be attributed to unclear requirements, unrealistic expectation, poor communication, lack of collaboration, no end user involvement, and on and on and on. And today, we have Nadia today to lead this conversation, share her experiences, strategies she has adopted over her many years of experience. My name is Oge, and I'm the founder of Pollard Consult. I'm your host for the Future Forward Analyst. Welcome to today's episode. Nadia is a very dear friend of mine. We've worked together a couple of years back. I learned a lot with the little time I spent working with her, but we kept in touch over the years. Nadia has over 10 years of experience in a variety of fields. Her main areas of experience includes aviation, sports and entertainment, maintenance and repair, even main technologies like mobile, web, Microsoft Dynamics, Power Platforms, and on and on and on. I don't have any better person to talk about the role of the business analyst in software development projects. Nadia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
I would love you to start this way. I kind of summarized your experience, but I would love you to tell our audience how you started your career, how you've navigated over the years, how you've learned, how you've gathered so much experience and doing the beautiful work I know you to do as a business analyst within organizations.
So, like many other business analysts, I actually started from a completely different education, from a completely different background. I was actually working in container shipping, ocean container shipping. Completely different field. I got a chance to work with software development, which later I realized I was actually doing a business analyst job. And after having come to Canada and needing to find myself in this market once again, I decided that, you know what, I like doing that. I very much enjoyed my role as a business analyst back in the day when this was just a side gig. And I decided to try that, to give it a try. And I realized that that's where I should have been from the get-go. I just didn't know that because I learned about myself that I like providing solutions. I like hearing someone say, here's my challenge, or even, you know what, not say it that explicitly, but describe it. Oh, you know what, I've been working with this app and it's so awful. Why is it awful? Oh, it is awful because A, B, C, D. And then with time, I learned to translate this into requirements. With time, I learned to translate this into needs. And I realized that I'm enjoying this. And I'm enjoying the most to give them a better way of doing things, be that an end product or be that an MVP or be that whatever phase. But the moment I give them something to work with that works better than the thing that they were struggling with, it's like an entire enlightenment. And it can be as simple as a report, just a better built report. It can be a full-on application. It could be a different website. It could be anything. But the moment you give them something better, you see that enjoyment. And you know what? I've decided that I like that. I like that, and I would like to stay in that field, in that space. And I've been working for a professional services company, which allowed me to work in different industries and different fields. With professional services companies are like they're outsourced, very roughly speaking, they're outsourced. Yeah. We are being hired for a certain project. We do our work. Sometimes over the course of several years, sometimes it's just come, provide services, and you go. On one hand, it could be tiring because every time you find yourself learning a new industry and being thrown into a pool that you have no idea how to swim in. And sometimes it's very rewarding because you get a chance to try something new. So that's where I stayed. I like it. I enjoy it. I see myself staying with that for a long time. But it does come with challenges, like you mentioned, which is what we wanted to discuss here now.
Yeah. Thank you so much. What I hear you say, you love helping people navigate through challenges, helping them figure out how to do things better, making their life better, easier
Yeah.
overall. Yeah. Okay. So my next question is this. I know I left it open to you to pick a topic to talk about. Why did you select this topic and why do you think it's important?
Because we often tend to speak about topics that are well spoken about. How to define requirements. What is a business need versus a business requirement? What is a test case? And there is a typical set of topics that are being discussed in meetings like this. But as I was joining different teams throughout the course of my years in professional services, I kept coming across the same challenge, the people challenge. And I find it that it's not being discussed enough. And I thought this could be a good opportunity for us to raise a topic that isn't discussed as often.
I love that. I love that. Okay. To get us started today, we have the first question. It's about understanding the role of the BA. Can you elaborate on the unique position a business analyst holds within a development team and how this role has evolved in recent times?
So I think that a business analyst is still a very young role. It's not like an accountant. Accountants have been around for, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of years. Lawyers have been around for centuries. A business analyst is a new role. If you compare Canadian market, for example, to other markets in different countries, you may even find that they don't have a role like that. And when you start digging and asking questions, so who is doing this? So who is defining requirements? You will often hear that it's a different role on the team, like a project manager does that or a project lead does that, which is where this task, this duty used to sit with before. And then with time, and obviously lots of influence, so it happened that the market finally realized, you know what, this role, this bucket of understanding business needs, defining business requirements, connecting between the business and the technical side is a
Mhm.
full-on role. It's a full-time job role. Yes, it can be done from a side of a desk. My
Yeah.
CEO can sit here, talk to a client, hear what they need, somehow translate this to the technical team, and the technical team will probably deliver. However, we know that the quality of the end product highly depends on this exact communication. So, and in my impression, I'm no expert in the field of how business analyst role got created, but that's my impression. That's how it created by the need. There was a need for someone to be the contact connection.
Yeah.
So, being the pivotal role, the pivotal point between the business and the technical team, we tend to wear a million other hats. And I'll expand on that for a second, but I'd like to make it very I'd like to give a description here that I usually use for people who are completely foreign to this type of role and keep asking me, oh, so what do you do? What do you do? I listen to the business people. I
Mhm.
translate their simple language to technical terms. And I know how to speak to my development team so that they understand what the client wants. I'm the translator in between. Now, this role comes with a bunch of other hats, like I mentioned, and those would be add ons. They're not necessary, they're not the core part of my role or any BA's role, but they will depend on the team composition that you're joining. On some teams, could be expected or the team could benefit from a BA
Mhm.
doing more, like doing some UI UX role, doing some testing, doing some leadership, and on and on and on. So the way I see it, there is the main core of what a BA does, what only the BA does. No one else on the team will do that. And if BA doesn't do that or doesn't do that well, it's not done. And that is the understanding of requirements and translation of the business needs to requirements. That's the core Again, I'll repeat that again. No one else on the team will do that, and no one else on the team should be doing that except for the BA. Everything else is a peripheral, and the peripheral layer is huge. I find it that depending on the level of seniority of the business analyst, they could be joining teams with different needs. I was on teams where I had to not only perform, in addition to the core that I mentioned, I was doing QA, I was doing UI UX, I was doing PMing, I was doing account management. So when I was asked, what are you doing on the team? I would say, I'm doing everything but write the code. And it highly depends on the size of the team and on the composition of the team. Because if my company tomorrow decides that they want to engage a professional designer so that our result is more professional or whatever other reason, right? Even for PR, it doesn't matter. Then the need for me to do that job would shrink. Moreover, it will start creating overlaps. It will start creating challenges. That is one example. Most of us will probably be joining a team where there is a PM, where there is an account manager, usually a salesperson. So really, what is expected depends on the team and on what the team needs. Because I have been on teams where there is a person to do that job. Like one of my typical examples is my first team. Actually, the first team that I joined when I started working in software development, it was me as the BA, a QA person, a dedicated QA person that's their specialty, and a few developers. But very quickly, I've learned that our QA person is not the best. They're not the best at understanding requirements. They have been missing use cases and test cases left, right, and center. So very quickly, what I learned that I have to do is be the QA lead on the project, aside for my main role. So you see, it really depends not only on the team composition, but also on the team's needs. And that is a very core part to how a BA can efficiently fit in a team. I think it's a very long answer. Does that answer the question?
But it was very enlightening. And I also love the fact that you talked about the BA's role actually depending on the needs of the team, right? And it varies from organization to organization, project to project, or maybe client work, right? So
absolutely.
Now, okay, want to say something? Okay, I would. You mentioned something just shortly before you concluded about having a QA person on the team, but then maybe they weren't that effective on the role of quality assurance and testing, and you had to lead QA. Now, let's talk a bit about these overlaps and how a BA can navigate those overlaps without stepping on toes. For example, if I were the QA person on that project, I might not find it so very interesting, you coming to step in to take on my role, right? So in what ways can the BA role conflict or complement with the duties of other members in the team? For example, the tester incident like you mentioned, or even a UX designer in a team, in a development team.
So it's a very important aspect. And I would strongly recommend to do like mental math. Try to be aware of all the different areas where the overlap can happen. And again, really depending on the seniority, because if I were talking to a junior BA right now, I would probably not say half the things that I'm saying, but I am referring to, to the more advanced stages. So let's take a few moments to try to review the different areas of overlap with the different specialties. Okay. So, and these are only a few ideas. Obviously, there could be more, and I really invite people on the call here to maybe suggest more ideas. I could have missed half of them, so I'd love to add them to my list so that I'm aware and prepare, and maybe can watch out for them on my next project, right? Because really, everything I'm going to say now is because I stumbled over them. These are pain points that I had to go through, get to that into that pain point, see how to overcome, and then overcome them. So I'd love to be able to expect more. All right. So one area is, as we mentioned, UI UX. I think it's the one that we can relate to maybe the easiest. For example, how often are we asked to suggest wireframes? Quite often, right?
Yeah.
But then what does a UI UX person do? They're also
True.
expected to suggest wireframes. And if you're put on a team with a UI UX person, how do you not conflict, especially if you have different views? So wireframes and designs are one area, but the other area that many people may not be aware of, UI UX field is not only for designs. It's not only, people tend to think about UI UX field as UI. They define the shapes and colors and the layout on the screen and whatnot. You know what? They are also responsible by definition of their role for user flows.
Okay.
Now, I didn't know that until one of my sister actually started learning UI UX. And I learned that, listen, UI UX people are also responsible for flows. I'm responsible for flows. But then when you think about this, flow has a direct impact on the user experience. So there is a huge overlap. And I believe the market is still not ready to reconcile that and say, you do this and you do that. So it's down to the individual people to find how they work together. And I'll get to that in a moment, but I'd like to just raise those points of awareness because they could be very challenging. So
Can I quickly ask a question
sure,
before you
of
proceed?
course.
You mentioned user flow. What
Yes.
exactly do you mean by user flow? Because when I hear UI UX, I think of user interface, user experience. Now I hear you say user flow. What exactly do you mean by user flow?
What happens when you don't manage, when you fail to log in? You provide a wrong password.
Okay, so maybe either the screen is blank or it tells me, sorry, your password or your username is wrong. It depends,
Exactly.
basically.
Exactly. That's an example of a user flow. What happens on the next click? When you
Mm.
when you try to apply for something online, or when you try to cancel something online, what happens next? What is your next click? Does it happen immediately? Do you need a confirmation box? When this confirmation or pop-up box comes up, what's showing on that confirmation box? Is it only an okay, a confirm? Is it a cancel? Can I go out of this?
Mm-hmm.
What language shows on the screen, right? Even the labeling of the buttons is direct user experience. Because
Yeah.
I'll give you one example. One of the typical ways to go wrong with the user experience, for example, or directly negatively, the easiest way to negatively impact user experience is to use very generic language like, whoops, something went wrong. When I see those, I know that they just haven't invested the time in user experience because, whoops, something went wrong doesn't tell me what to do with this.
Exactly.
Okay?
Doesn't tell you the next steps to take.
Exactly. But that's user flows.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, your next click, your next step, the development of what screens you go through,
Mm-hmm.
what clicks you go through. It might not sound a lot, but if you try to examine your use of different application, your use of websites, your use of any system at all, you'll
Mm-hmm.
see how much there is of it. So that is a direct part, a huge part of the UX person's work. But you know what? As it turns out, it's a huge part of our work as well because that is requirements.
True.
There is no clear cut. Okay? So that is one challenge to be aware of. There is no clear cut. And everything I'm going to mention on my list does not have a clear cut, or at least in my experience.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for UI UX
No,
area? Maybe other people in the crowd
in
have
the
other
chat.
ideas.
Okay, please kindly drop your comments, your questions in the chat. Nadia is asking for feedback. Please share your experiences. Maybe how has your role conflicted with other team members in your project? and we want to learn from your experience. And are there strategies you use to managing them? Kindly drop in the comment. We would love to know. Nadia, before you proceed, I want to quickly ask again. One of the very common questions I get when I train BAs, because that is what I typically do, is how do I know exactly what my role is on the project? If I get in a company, how do I know where my work is? Where does it start? Where does it end? And from my experience, the first thing I say is, where's the project charter, or where's your project governance document? Which I expect if you have a PM, he would have documented that the roles and responsibility of all the team members, especially when it comes to where you have team roles that may conflict. For example, the BA will collaborate with a whole lot of people, but what is the BA responsible and accountable for? You understand?
While, yeah, and I agree that while this document is a good starting point,
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the answer to this question is so dynamic. It's such a live entity that I honestly don't think it can be well documented unless the document is constantly updated. And you know what? Moreover, the real answer might never be expressed verbally. So here's what I would say. Start from that point. Yep, that's your good starting point. But then follow the next, like I would follow, here's what I usually follow. And I joined quite a few new teams recently. First of all, I knew, and I didn't let anyone argue with me on that requirements identification is my jurisdiction. I'll listen to team members. I'll take their opinion and their advice into account.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, that is my say. That is my area to validate with the business and get back to the team and say, nope, even if we thought otherwise, that's what the business needs. So that core is mine. Then when I join a new team, I just ask them, dear team, what do you need me to do? The reason why I do this so plain and simple is because they know what they struggle with. And that gives them the opportunity to hint to me where they need me to not get involved.
Okay.
For example, almost always we'll have a PM, and almost always we will have a technical lead.
Mm-hmm.
These conflicts are very painful because usually these people would be at a higher seniority than we are. Now try to compete with someone with a higher seniority. While UI UX people and QA people are usually either at our level or lower,
True.
PMs and technical leads, especially if they're technical architects, are higher than us. Doesn't matter what you do. You can be the lead BA or whatever role you might have. They would still, even if it's not official, and usually it's not official, right? But they will hold more gravity. That allows me to hear from them where they need my help. And it allow them to tell me where they struggle. I'll give you one example. I joined one team recently and I asked the PM, what do you need me to do? How do you need me to help you?
Mm-hmm.
And that PM said, listen, I'm new to this space. It's a Power Platform, Microsoft Power Platform. I'm new to this specific space we're working in. So I can do the planning, I can do the invoicing, but I need your help in understanding work breakdown. Here, it's a
Exactly.
pure win. It's a pure win. Not
Mm-hmm.
only that I didn't have struggle on that, it was welcome. Same thing with the technical architect, senior lead. Sorry, I forget how we call
Solution,
them.
sometimes they're called solutions architect.
Yeah, well, they have different titles on different projects.
Mm-hmm.
That person came to me and said, you know what? I hate dealing with the small tasks, or I hate going on client calls. Please save me the trouble. Just give me the pure and give me this executive summary.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. I had no banging heads here. I knew exactly how they need me to help. So that is a great starting point. Ask them. Plain and simple, people like when they're asked, people like to say what they want. And I find it that it's often much stronger than any documentation, especially on one-on-one calls.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, very, yeah, I love that perspective. But now, while you were describing this, something came to mind. Where do you draw the line? If everybody, because you ask them, oh, where can I help you? If they end up dumping the bulk of your work on your plate, how do you manage that? For a new BA
It,
starting out, right? You might go ask, and then somebody says, oh, okay, they're available to work. All right, take this, take this, take this. How do you manage that situation?
First, I would usually try it all. I would try myself. I would try to see how I can fit all the holes. If I learn that the bulk of this work exceeds my capacity on this project, I would bring this up depending on, like, it's a balancing game. Really, there are no hard rules here. It's always a balancing game. You have to have a starting point, and then you have to go agile. You
Mm-hmm.
have to go agile. You have to adjust yourself all the time because a few reasons. People don't trust you at first. Zero trust. Unless that person hired you for the job,
Mm-hmm.
they won't trust you. You have to earn their trust. So
True.
with this trust comes a certain dynamics. And people that were protective of certain territories, say you're used to participating in technical designs, with like I'm used to participating in technical designs because I understand how things need to work. And it has direct relevance to requirements and how we fulfill them. So if technical
Exactly.
designs are wrong or not taking into account some portions of the roadmap, we'll be in trouble later. And oftentimes I see a further horizon than the technical lead just because of the nature of my job. So I am used to be part of technical designs, but you know what? Oftentimes I'm not included, especially on new teams, because I don't have their
You've
sufficient
not,
trust yet.
you've not earned
But
their trust.
as time goes by, and if you
Mm-hmm.
play your cards right, you gain that trust. And guess what? Once you gain that trust, you're allowed to do more. And you know what? Once you're allowed to do more, you actually need more hours in your day. And then you have to recalculate again, and then you have to
Mm-hmm.
rebalance again. So it's like raising a child. It's a constant balancing game, right? So there is no one answer.
True.
I know that I haven't answered your question, but
No, no,
that's
no.
what it
So,
is.
like you said, you have to rebalance. If you have so much on your plate, you have a manager you report to, reach out to them, discuss with them. Oh, I thought I could handle this, but it's becoming too much, and I don't want it to affect the overall project. Right? You speak up.
Exactly.
You don't
Exactly.
suffer in silence, and then everything blows up.
And
And really,
it doesn't mean that you always have to reach out to the authority. Oftentimes, project manager is the authority on the project.
yeah,
You don't always have to reach out to them. I would, if you find it that you have much more on your plate that you can handle, in that case, I would actually reach out to the different people with whom I can split work, and I would discuss it with them that I'm overwhelmed, I'm simply overloaded. How
yeah,
can we better split work? First of all, you don't have to pull rank, and that plays in your advantage.
mhm,
People, again, like to be consulted with. They like to make decisions, and they feel like you're working with them. So that works greatly. And you know what? The same approach works for the other for the flip side. If the team is working so well together and they so don't want you on the team or don't think they need you, that you're left with such a small core that you simply don't have enough work to do the same. You slowly try to gain trust, try to expand your duties, talk to each individual team member from whom you think you can chip out work,
yeah.
and you slowly see how you can do more. And believe me, in no time you'll be overloaded.
Yeah, thanks for that response. I have one thing, and this is something I find very common. I really want you to talk about it before we move on to the next question. So traditionally, and this goes back to the core of the role of the BA you started with. Traditionally, we learned that business analysts are the bridge between the business team and the technical folks. So you have the BA go gather requirements from the business and then hand it over to the technical team. And experience has shown that has not worked out well. So now you have a more agile approach of the user story, coming up with the user story, defining the BA, working with the business to define user story. So as a user, I want this feature so that I can enjoy this benefit, or so that we can drive this business outcome. And then coming together as a cross-functional team where you have the business, the BA, the technical folks coming together to then talk about that requirement before coming up with a documented functional or solution requirement. What approach have you adopted in recent times, or what would you say from your experience? How did you start requirement gathering? How has it evolved? What do you think is the best approach?
I think I'm a bungee jumper in that area. I'm not a big fan of very strict rules. I'm not a big fan of following very strict templates. So when I come to a discovery session, especially when it's a first discovery session, I would often come with only a few questions on my hands. I would come to the business and say, hey, listen, guys, I just want to hear from you. Show me what you're doing now. Tell me what are your pain points. Really, only a handful of those leading questions. I don't come with templates. I don't come with, again, unless it's not my first iteration, say it's phase 3 of the same product, right? When it's the very initial discovery, I often would come with very little on my hands because I want to hear from them. That would be my main key. Listen to the business. If it's a large application or a large solution that serves different groups, say I mentioned that I have worked with maintenance and repairs applications. When it's maintenance and repair, it's often in industrial environment. In industrial environments, you always have several layers of jobs. You have the field operators, you have supervisors, you have the management that consumes the data that flows up the stream. So one of my other key strategies, if you will, or ways to operate would be to listen to them separately. Split the different groups into different interview sessions, because you will hear more.
True.
So that would be that. First, to come in and listen. Listen, record everything, audio transcripts, because I listen, then I go back to my desk and then I listen and re-listen to that recording multiple times. I can spend a few hours on half an hour of recording, because I go back and forth and I re-listen and I pick out the little things that sometimes just, it's a half a word that slips by. Oh yeah, and I also wanted this and that, and then they continue, right? So that's this. Then my next step would be to involve the senior developer, the tech lead, or whoever runs the show from the technical perspective. Very briefly, half an hour call. Get them on a call and say, hey, listen, we're examining this and this and that. That's the general thinking. Here's the general direction. What can you tell me right up front? What should I be aware of? What questions should I ask? Maybe it's technologies, right? Maybe they can sometimes offer the perspective of, if the client is on this and that version, or if they need this and that version to be catered for, say we are very restricted with what we can offer them because it's a very old version, for example, right? It's just one example. So what I do is I go agile on this process as well. I try to slice it up. First, listen to the business, understand generally what they need, get some kind of set of high-level requirements, the main ones. Interview not even interview, engage, because they're a partner. Engage my senior leadership, my technical leadership. That it's one person. I don't need the whole team. It's one person. Tell me what you think, high-level estimates, like ballpark. Tell me if it's a week of work or 5 months of work. They will have the sense for that. This perspective helps me take the next layer of my discovery with the client, right? So I find that this approach works. Same as agile works in practice for work. We found that it's not efficient to develop everything and ship it to the client and say, it's done. Same approach with requirements. No, it doesn't work this way, because you'll be working hours on hours on your requirements only to discover that you missed half of them. So
yeah, or even
that
maybe
has
the client has moved on, they're not interested in that, or the market has
exactly,
evolved. Yeah.
exactly. So layers, slice it up, and get your people involved early. Again, if there is
Mhm.
a, and I gave the example of involving my technical leadership as a partner early on. But that's just one example. Sometimes it's very important to involve QA early on, very early on, especially if the project is for automation, right? Or to involve my UI UX people early on, because let's say that we're designing something completely new and very innovative
Yeah.
in terms of visuals. We need to know what span of opportunity of tools we're working with, right? I don't want to overpromise to the client, because whatever you do, it doesn't matter how you talk to the client, how you hold your discovery sessions. If you say anything in those sessions, you will probably drop some hints of solutioning. As much as you try to avoid that, it's unavoidable. I don't believe it's completely avoidable, especially
Mhm.
because you get excited. You want them to get excited. And sometimes you hear them, oh, we're struggling with that. And you just have to say, you know what? I just did that for another client, right? So whether you want it or not, you're thinking of a solution. So
Mhm.
better know your span of tools right up front, so you don't overpromise, because that's one of the bigger dangers of what we do.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that response. But one last to follow up with that is, do you at some point decide to bring the business, the lead solution architect, or the US person, or even the lead QA in a meeting? At some point, does that ever happen?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, depending on its people, because especially with technical leadership, developers often want to be behind the curtain. They don't want to see the client, they don't want to speak to them. And most often that's the case. So
Mhm.
I would first see if it, again, depending on who I'm working with, some people are just more communicable, right? So it's easy for me to bring them on a call. I know that it's probably not going to go bad. Often I bring them in just to listen, because even if they're not saying one word in that meeting, they will often pick up on things that I haven't, and they will add perspective that I don't have. So not definitely not on the first call. Again, unless it's not the first phase of the project. There's I keep talking about projects, about agile projects, and projects where I can go back to the client as many times as I want. But I keep forgetting that there is another perspective, clients that are not that easily approachable. Clients with whom we need to book meetings once a month, etc. So really depends on your setting. If it's easy to schedule calls with your client, I would pick and choose who I involve and when, because I want my discussion to be productive. You know what? Sometimes I don't want the other functions in the room, because I know that they will divert the conversation in a different direction.
Mhm.
Sometimes I will
Mhm.
purposely exclude them. I want to hear what I need to hear first, right? Sometimes I would include them immediately or second meeting. I know that everything I'm answering you is depending.
Yeah.
So much of what we do and so many of our decisions are, they don't have a clear answer, they don't have a clear cut, and they will depend on our judgment at the moment, or in that situation, or with those people, with the setup that we have on hand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I totally agree with your approach. Initially, keep it simple. Don't go with all your 100 list of questions you want to ask the business, the initial discovery session. And it's just for you to really get a hang and even define what the business needs it at that point, and validate, like get the customer or the client to confirm it before you then begin to explore with other part of the team. who you want to engage with, or who you want to go with you in the nest. It could even be a question the client asks about something, and then you feel, I think I should go with the UX person to this thing because they might be in a better position to answer this question. Or even, I really love that part of picking up things you would miss, because the client might be describing their needs in such a way that, based on your experience, you might not think of a solution option, but the technical lead or the UX person sitting there in the meeting can come up with an option that might really work out well.
Or they might identify requirements that I simply don't have the knowledge to identify.
Exactly. I love that.
Right?
I love
Yeah.
that. And that is really about, see, as BAs, we can't know everything. We are not experts, right?
No.
And we
No.
really rely on those subject matter experts to get our work done. The business team is the subject matter expert from the business. The solution architect is the subject matter expert from the technical perspective. The QA person is the subject matter expert from the quality assurance. So it's more being humble enough to know our limitations and leverage the skills of others on the team.
Exactly. And that's actually the main way to resolve any conflicts. Know your strength and know your weaknesses, and be very honest, at least to yourself, about them. Right? And by the way, you mentioned something very important that I neglected from my previous answer. In all this process of identifying requirements and doing estimates and whatnot, validation versus the client is a key step. And honestly, I know that user stories and all, it's a very well accepted way of working. I wouldn't write a single user story until I validate the list of my requirements with the client, because that's how I don't work through user stories. I work through requirements, because in my opinion, requirements are a more pure representation of what is needed. And then a single requirement can actually translate to more than a single user story. That's my problem, not the client's. So I try to work both ways: write user stories, present them to the client, ask to validate. And I work the other way: write requirements, present them to the client, and ask to validate. And I find it that way number two, just focus on requirements, is much easier for the business to perceive, because it's independent of other technical considerations that the client might just not be aware of that they're needed. They would ask me, why do we need that? Why do we have a user story for the database? And why do we have a user story for the front end? Well, because, and that led me, with time, that led me to start working simply through requirements with the client. And that proved itself to be an easier path to better understanding.
Thank you so much. We have one question here,
Yeah.
and it's around tools you use. So, what tools have you used to collaborate with different team members, and what strategies, even maybe beyond tools, would you recommend
Tools
to
in what
it,
sense? Like,
collaboration tools? Communication, you have diverse set of people working together on a project. You're all working on the same feature, on the same requirement or user stories. Are there tools you use to facilitate this collaboration and communication across the team?
honestly, the main tool, and the one tool that reduces barriers the most, is turning video on.
Love that.
I'm sorry, it's so straightforward and it's so trivial, but so many people don't do that. And then it doesn't matter what you use Slack, you use WebEx, it really doesn't matter, as long as communication channel is open. So the tools, what's important, in my opinion, it's to gain any collaboration, we need to reduce as many barriers as possible, especially working remotely like most of us do today. And video. Guys, it doesn't matter if you're in your sweatsuit. It doesn't matter if you're not made up, or if your hair is bad today. It doesn't matter. Turn your video on, because there is no better way of reducing barrier. Oh, sorry, there is one better way to actually get together, but let's be
Interesting.
frank. Let's be frank. We can't always meet together. My team sits in Saskatchewan. I saw them in November. And since then, I only saw them on video, right? That's one. Obviously, use tools like Whiteboard. So I don't know what people on the call are using, but my company uses Teams a lot, and Teams has a Whiteboard extension which allows multiple team members to write on the same whiteboard, which is
Yeah.
cool. Use tools like Figma because it's interactive. Anything that is interactive, shared folders even, but it's mainly strategies over tools. Strategies would be to involve everyone, let everyone talk, ask for everyone's opinion, even if you think that that person should not have an opinion on the matter. Like, sorry, I won't give examples to not offend anyone, but we know what we all have been in those situations when that person that it's completely out of their expertise is speaking up. And you know what?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's us, right? So that it's more down to strategies than tools. Make sense?
I totally agree with you. Connection, very, very important. There's a question from Dami. Dami says, as a BA, how do you successfully collaborate with the project manager? I assume PM is project manager, Dami. He says, how do you successfully collaborate with the PM on gathering requirements from the business sponsor?
In my opinion, the PM should be present in this process mainly to facilitate calls, to schedule them and to facilitate calls. Sometimes, depending on the occasion and the size of the project, sometimes the PM will also be dictating or have a hand in deciding what tools we work with, although it's a very gray area. And in regards to some tools, I would not allow to be dictated. Some tools I would prefer to work with. But PM should really be there to just facilitate the process. The main requirements gathering is yours as the BA. It's your job to ask the questions. It's your job to say how many discovery sessions you need. It's your job to say who should be in those meetings, how to split the target crowds, how to document requirements. It's your job as the BA to say what tool you'll use for that, not the PMs. And I have had PMs who tried to dictate that to me. Didn't really go well. And as I said before, the best way is try to find the ground with this person.
Yeah.
Sometimes they want to be involved more. So if it doesn't take away from your job and from your results, let them be involved more.
Thank you for that response. Dami, I hope that response that answered your question. Michael is asking, as a new BA in a team, how do you maintain balance on not doing too much or less of your job? How do you, he's new on the job, right? I'm just making it, I'm hypothetical. You are new in a team, you don't have so much experience doing business analysis. How do you really maintain the balance of not coming short of expectation and not taking on too much too?
Thread carefully, really.
Okay.
Thread carefully. Start with only the core, and the core is identifying requirements. But then please remember that identifying requirements is not only for the solution. Your job as the BA is also to remember to identify the requirements of your team members. We often forget that, but it's our job. We are a pivotal role. No one will tell us, or most cases, our team members would not say that plainly, especially if they're weak at something, right? If you have a team member who is not that good at UI UX, they know that. But they will probably not come out and say, hey, listen, that's part of my job, but I'm not that good at it. Would you like to help me? So thread carefully. First, listen, not only to your client, listen to your team. Ask them, seriously, ask them, how can I be of help? So I'll give you an example. When I joined my current team, one of my current teams, I'm on several. When I joined them back in November, I replaced another BA. And I know that they weren't happy with them. So it was a very valuable information for me to know, because when I came in and I asked, how can I help? I immediately started hearing, listen, that BA was very weak in identifying business requirements. They were very weak in writing user stories. We got a hot mess from them in DevOps. That gave me the roadmap immediately. So being new on a team, gives you an opportunity to find your place. And I also started cheating at some point. In what way? I started leveraging the fact that I'm new, because sometimes being new, dumb questions are allowed. Sometimes being new allows you to push certain boundaries or question certain bad habits that the team might have, the client might have. So thread carefully, listen. Don't be afraid of asking questions, even frank questions, but try to make them non-invasive and subtle. For example, not why are we not using that technology? Reverse. Why are we using this technology? What is the reason? Always assume that there was a good reason to do that. Well, you know what? Oftentimes you'll hear that we don't know why we're doing that, or someone made a bad decision back in the day and no one lifted this yet. So you come and say, hey, great, let's lift this. So use that. Leverage being new on the team, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nadia. We are at the top of the hour. Michael, I would quickly add to that again. You are starting new. You could go to your engagement manager to ask, what are my roles? What are the expectations of me on this role? You could also talk to the PM, like Nadia mentioned earlier. Oh, how can I help? What is my role? For you, you are new. Maybe you are being careful. You don't want to get overwhelmed or tread into areas you're unfamiliar with. But if you have a clearly stipulated responsibility, what you are responsible and accountable for on the project, might be a good place to start, and then allow yourself to learn and grow on the role. Nadia, do you have any closing word for our audience today? And this has been a very, very enlightening session. It's gone in different direction, but very, 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 very enlightening. I've learned a whole lot, and I'm sure the audience have learned too. Any closing word for us today?
Be bold. Don't
Mm-hmm.
be afraid to ask questions. That's our job. It's our job to ask the questions. Remember that. Just even write this as a logo on your wallpaper. Ask questions and be bold. Don't be afraid to shake some trees. You can always roll back if you stepped into something wrong. You can always roll it back and say, okay, no, never mind. Don't be afraid. This will
Mm-hmm.
take you places.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nadia. Thanks for spending your evening with us, and thank you so much for everyone that joined us this evening. I really appreciate your time. Please, we have another session coming up next week. We'll be announcing that very soon. You'll see the event posters on LinkedIn. But before the end of this week, you're also going to get a link to YouTube, where we've put this recording for you. We'll also summarize the session and put it out on our newsletter. Please do well to subscribe to the newsletter, set a notification button so that when we have a new edition, you get to know. Thank you all very much again for your time this evening. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Olga. Have a good night.
All right, bye.
Bye, everyone.